out momentarily on that. But basically, as you've already heard from Oscar, the topic I'm presenting to you is why service research in emerging and developing economies. And he's already told you enough about me. I'll tell you a little bit more about me further in, but let me get to why this topic is a very personal topic for me. My Chilean ancestry is what I've called the spice in my mostly Northern European DNA. I'm 6% Hispanic as a result of my great-great-grandmother, Maria Estallar. She was born in Santiago, Chile, and she sailed to San Francisco, California during the gold rush in 1849, California gold rush. And she lived and died in Chile Gulch, California. That was an area where many miners went to San Francisco. They ended up settling there. They were very good miners. The Chileans were very good miners. There was a war fought. The white settlers didn't like the fact that the Chileans were such good miners. They stole their mining claims. There's a lot of other tragedies from that era that were inflicted on the Chileans. So this is a personal issue to me in terms of inclusion of people who deserve respect. Here's a scene, and I left out that information was from my sister, and I even included more that you can find on the slides that we'll make available later. My sister sent me this scene too. It's a picture of San Francisco in 1849. And you can see that looks very confusing because don't those buildings look like they are ships? There were so many people who went to San Francisco that they hauled the boats that were abandoned out of the harbor, made housing out of them. That's a very complex sort of environment in 1849. And to me, it's a good reminder of how complex human experience is. So as you can see in my statement, service research should seek to understand the breadth and the depth of human experience. So here are the topics I've got for you today. First is, can we become Homo sapiens? Can we do that? Can we actually become Homo sapiens? That's our scientific name. The rapid growth of the service research community, expanding the global service research community, which is the main reason I'm here talking to you. Cultivating wiser research about humanity is something that we can all do together. We can really help our species. And fifth, collaborating to serve humanity, to finish up with my talk. So first then, can we become Homo sapiens? Here's a good slide to bring that issue to the foreground. It's a great quote from Bob Marley, a Jamaican reggae singer. The song is a redemption song. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. I got to teach in Jamaica for 5 years. The Jamaicans consider that song almost their national anthem. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to hear it. But that mental slavery idea it's not just physical slavery, because they were previously slaves. They had been physical slaves. He's talking about mental slavery. The problems we have as a species is because we actually aren't the wise Homo sapiens yet. Because sapiens means wise. We're actually ignorant. Ignorance is the natural condition of every human child. We know that. Every child has to learn to walk, talk, and all those other things we've learned. And education and extended childhoods are how we cope with our ignorance. That's what makes us amazing when we have education and extended childhoods, but can also leave us quite ignorant. Knowledge is easy for us to share today. We don't have to do the books that you see in that image of the library that I've got in front of you. We can do it electronically. We can do Zoom meetings like now and share these across the time zones, which to me is just fabulous. So it's easy to share, but ignorance is easier to share too, which undermines progress. And wisdom is, unfortunately, still difficult to share. It's very difficult to share wisdom. So here's an image from my childhood in 1968. This picture was taken on Christmas Eve in 1968. It led to the description of Earthrise, because that's a picture from astronauts orbiting the moon, looking back at Earth. You could call it the first selfie of planet Earth. It later was called Spaceship Earth by many people. And as a thought experiment, think about how would humanity behave if we understood the full meaning of this photo. It's not just that we know for sure that it's not a flat Earth, because that did help prove that it's not flat. But more importantly, if we understood that we are the only known planet with life on it. And we call ourselves smart, but we haven't acted that smart. So that is, to me, the problem. Why didn't 1968 transform humanity? Why? It's the ignorance problems we have. But here's another way of describing the problem from E.O. Wilson, a very famous sociobiologist. In 2009, he said, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Now, All three of those combined are where the problem exists, because we are very emotional, even though we try to pretend we're all very rational. Our institutions are still not adapted to our modern times, and our technology tends to outrun our wisdom and our knowledge. We get into lots of trouble because of new technologies, and we are there now with AI, in case you have any doubts. We don't quite know how AI is going to change everything. But 1968 did change me, so I need to give you a little bit of a sense of that. Also in 68, before that Earthrise picture, there were many, many problems in 68. There was a Vietnam War, there were civil rights protests, women's rights protests. I was very disturbed by those political and military horrors in 68. It changed my perspective. So seeking fairness became my personal quest in life. I wanted to solve for fairness. I wanted to make the world a better place. So I headed off to college wanting to do that. And in doing that, I got 3 business degrees in 9 years, one by one, never stopped, finishing with a marketing PhD at Arizona State in 1980. My dissertation was on service research as of 1980. So I'm one of the early founders. I'll touch on that soon. But basically, service research, service history, service theater, service design, transformative service research, and serving humanity have all been among the many topics I've been engaged with. And the serving humanity is tied to ServCo-Lab. I also wanted to learn more about leadership, because I thought that was something that wisdom required and fairness required. So I've twice been in a marketing department chair, a total of 23 years. And in 1993, as some of you have already learned, I founded ServSig in 1993. It was the first organized group of service scholars, and Jay created one of the other groups of service scholars with IRSSM. EMAC has now got a service group. So all of those things are progress because we've got more people. I'm here to help you grow it more. But the last point I have on this slide is that in 2018, 50 years after that change in my life in 68, I started ServCo-Lab. I thought it was time. And in fact, I retired from academia to have full time to work on this. So now to the rapid growth of the service research field. Again, I was part of it, and I'll touch on that as I go here. The service research field emerged because of unsolved service problems. The early founders of it, the people like me, we came out of business schools. And one of the articles that really helped sort of shock everybody was an article written by Lynn Shostak, a woman, a banker, breaking free from product marketing. She had an MBA from Harvard, and she wrote in that article that her MBA didn't prepare her to manage a bank. And why was that? And it's because she argued in that article. It's still a classic today, that what she had been taught didn't help her. There were 3 significant things that are part of that early field. There were academics and practitioners like her interacting. That was great. We were pretty interdisciplinary oriented because we had people who were interested in services coming in from various areas. And it was international from the beginning, but limitedly international. We had Europeans, especially Northern Europe, Sweden, Finland. We had France, and we had the United States. But there wasn't much more than that back then. But it still was better than just Americans or just French or pick any other one country. That was the start. The other thing I should mention is we were all so excited to meet each other that we started as a group, as a collaborative friendship group like Jay was talking about. What Jay has done and what I've tried to do is to help continue and build the friendship amongst the scholars of service research. So here's the quick slide that we wrote about, Mary Jo Bittner and Steve Brown and I wrote about in 1993. We did the first history of the service research field. We called it Tracking the Evolution of the Services Marketing Field. And there's a lot more I could tell you, but I won't tell you about that, but you can find the article and read the details. But we called it 3 stages. The calling out stage, that was Lynn Shostak's era. The scurrying about stage, and we're using a biological metaphor. So this is scurrying about as in small rodents, small monkeys, and so on. Scurrying about through the woods and jungle. 5 years. We decided things were moving that fast that by 1986, we could say that the service research field was walking erect up to 92. And 92 is the reason for that because that's when it was published the next year. So then later I wrote a second social evolution version of things later with Steve Grove. So we described 3 more stages: making tools, because of course now we're talking about humans. Our species is considered tool makers. Creating language, we create language, many languages, and building community. And the building community stage, I'm convinced, will always be a necessary stage, which is why it's so great to be part of your effort today. So a last slide on this issue of the field. Not long ago, 2023, Dave Bowen and I led an effort with our fellow living pioneering founders of the service research field to write about what we learned. And there's some great comments from each of the people about what they learned. This was a friendship group. We had so much fun writing that article just because we all had known each other for so very long. And there are people that are out, not part of it because they passed away. Christopher Lovelock is an example, Everett Gumison. We almost had Gumison in there, but he passed away before we could get him in. The quote at the end, the very last sentence of this article, service interactions are essential for human progress, so there will always be new opportunities for new service research and new service scholars. That part, if you remember that it's essential for human progress. Anytime you doubt whether or not you should be doing service research, that might help keep you focused on service research. Now to the expansion idea of expanding the community. So where are the service researchers now? They're primarily in Europe and Australia. And this is why these recent efforts of IRSSM to expand it are so important, because there's still smaller numbers in these other regions, but it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. They're also primarily in business schools, and that's also not so great. I'm convinced the service is so pervasive that every academic, except maybe the physicists or maybe the chemists, should be interested in service research. So it should go beyond business schools too. Both of those are not enough, and we need a larger and larger community. Service research needs much greater breadth and depth. We should serve the needs of the more 8 billion humans living on planet Earth, because they have so many different needs, and that we have a lot of incoherent human systems that are creating massive social disruption and global climate disruption. Those are systems created by humans that don't have to be incoherent, and they don't have to cause these disruptions. It can be changed. What we need are inclusive global service systems, and we need research about those systems for planet Earth. And IRSSM is playing a major role here by expanding this community, because the more perspectives, the better. And that gets me to a recent book. I read this over the Christmas holidays, The Wayfinders by Wade Davis. And you'll see the subtitle, perhaps it might be a little hard to read on your screen. It says, Why Ancient Wisdom Matters in the Modern World. He studied various parts of the world, Polynesia, that's where the inspiration for his title. He's got numerous stories from various parts of South America, the various peoples of South America. Not the most modern peoples, by the way, just the more ancient wisdoms of these various cultures. And he's got this idea that he created and coined the idea of ethnosphere. And so here's the quote, I'll just read it right to you. The sum total of all thoughts and intuitions, myths and beliefs, ideas and inspirations, brought into being by the human imagination since the dawn of consciousness. So it's not just now, it's the past too. The ethnosphere is humanity's greatest legacy, he says, and I put that in green because I think that captures it very succinctly. It is the product of our dreams, the embodiment of our hopes, the symbol of all we are and all that we, as a wildly inquisitive and astonishingly adaptive species, have created. Great quote. And what we're working on, I think, amongst the service research community is we are building out a better understanding of the ethnosphere. And that's why we need so many people with all these different backgrounds and perspectives included. And here's one more quote from this great book. At risk is a vast archive of knowledge and expertise, a catalog of the imagination, an oral and written language composed of the memories of countless elders and healers, warriors, farmers, fishermen, midwives, poets, and saints. In short, this artistic, intellectual, and spiritual expression of the full complexity and diversity of the human experience. Now, those last two words, human experience, CertCollab was founded on elevating human experience. So when I read that, I thought, I love that quote, especially because he's looking at it from a perspective of human experience. This book is very short also. It's about 150 some pages. It's a fun read. He's a great storyteller about these cultures. Now to cultivating wiser research about humanity. Because I think we not only need lots of us, but we need to elevate our research, and that's the wisdom issue. So here's a recent call for wisdom that we published in 2024. This is a CertCollab article. Edith Moulton-Tetlock is the first author. I'm the last author in that one. Service researchers should adopt wisdom as a primary topic and accept the challenge of propagating wiser research, wiser practice, and wiser societies. Enabling wiser service systems facilitates shared purposes, collaborative communication practices, and emergent wisdom for solving the shared problems of humanity. So this has become a major theme for CERCOLAB, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it because of that. I'm going to connect it to our mission, because our mission for CERCOLAB is a transformative service research mission, and I've got it there on the left. Our mission is to serve humanity through research collaborations that catalyze reducing suffering, improving well-being, and enabling well-becoming. Ignorance can cause suffering. So to me, much of the suffering that we see in the world is somehow tied to ignorance, not knowing how to prevent it, or actually ignorance. There are ignorant people causing it. Humans are capable of such ignorance. So that's the reducing suffering point. Knowledge can improve well-being, but to us in CERCOLAB, if knowledge was enough, we already would have solved all of our problems. Knowledge, we think, is not enough. We need wisdom too, and wisdom can enable well-becoming. And to clarify what we mean by well-becoming is new opportunities. Opportunities for each individual, opportunities for our species. That's well-becoming. Here's our synthesis of where things are today in the world. Humanity has always lived in systems. This is a known thing. We have been looking at it from social science perspectives, service research perspectives. We live in systems created by humans, and many systems are not serving humanity. That's the flaw in the system. That's the gap between what we can and could be if we are wiser and where we are now. So we should design systems that serve humanity wisely. And on the design point, I should add that there's a lot of service design research. I've participated in that. If you haven't started to read any of the service design literature, I urge you to do that, because we can change the systems with design. So part of what we think we need, and CERCOLAB thinks we need, is to rethink and reorganize knowledge systems to become wisdom systems. The academic systems and disciplines that we know around the world emerged around the pursuit of specific topics like physics or chemistry, biology, all these various topics. But service research didn't come out of just a single discipline. Many of us were in marketing, but many in management. There are people in art and engineering. There are people in the arts interested in service research. No discipline. And I think that means a great thing. It means that we're undisciplined. We have escaped the bounds of the limited thinking of specific disciplines. And I think we should retain that condition to help liberate our fellow humans. To not try to make a discipline of service, but to make it a coherent, wiser approach to solving human problems. And here's CERCOLAB's theory of change to wrap up this section, based on 3 service wisdom principles for serving humanity. And I should emphasize, we created these service wisdom principles very recently. Basically, there are 3 things that we think are common to every human culture. We think they're human universals. We think serving each other is a human universal. Serving the truth is a human universal, and serving the future is a human universal. We think all 3 are essential. The serving each other, just to emphasize that a little more, serving each other is how we build friendships and trust that Jay was talking about. Friendship requires that interaction, that friendly interaction. That's how trust develops. And then the others follow from there, actually. So the way we describe it, there's 3 service flows. Service enables collaboration. Collaboration enables wisdom. And wisdom enables service. So it's a regenerative theory of change, that it continues to grow with more wisdom feeding into more service, and on and on. That's, to us, the way our species can do a better job. So collaborating to serve humanity is my last topic. How can the IRSSM LATAM network and CERCOLAB collaborate? And I'm bringing up just a few ideas. There's many others we can discuss as we go, but CERCOLAB believes in serving all of humanity. Hence, we are eager to help emerging and developing economies. And I already told you my personal reason for caring about that, because I'm not just a Northern European by ancestry. I think all of us are more than just one thing. We are all the same species. CERCOLAB believes that service research needs a philosophy of service, a science and art of service, and many other conceptual frames. So we welcome your participation in helping build these things. We think there's a lot of areas that need work. A lot more work is needed in the arts, for example. A lot more work in the philosophical areas. What should service be? And CERCOLAB research itself is designed as levers and cranes for improving services. We didn't make that super explicit at first. We had a crane in our first article in 2020. But we've been building that out, and in fact, we hope a forthcoming article that has a much more explicit discussion of levers and cranes. But we would encourage you to consider applying, adapting, and improving these tools to solving human problems. And let me show you one crane example to emphasize what I mean. This is an article that I did with Marek Nusowski in Poland, published last year. The title, Elevating the Human Experience Through Service Standards, Insights from the Global Refugee Crisis. So we built this idea of human service standards for everybody under any circumstance, and then we applied it to refugees, which I think is a very critical need. And you can see in the crane there that there's 3 different levels to the crane. The bottom level is diversity. The idea is that everyone's different and they have a right to be different, and we should respect and serve those differences. Everyone's entitled to their own dignity, and we should respect each other. That's the dignity point. And the top level is agency, that everyone should have the right to the agency over their own body, their own mind, their own lives. So to us, it's agency, dignity, diversity. Those are the 3 service standards that we think should be applied to any human experience. And they could be applied to all kinds of situations in research all over the world. Are the people being served, or are these standards being neglected? Is agency being denied? Is dignity being denied? Diversity? Are all 3 denied? Very often, refugees are denied all 3 of those. It's a very common thing for refugees to be denied all 3 of those. The color of their skin affects whether or not they're treated right. They're disrespected. They're mistreated, locked up, all these horrible things. And it doesn't have to be that way. So some more details about CertCollab, and there's more on our website, but I want to emphasize these 2 issues especially. We have a scholarship coming up, and the deadline is March 16th. Any PhD student who received a acceptance at the forthcoming conferences, the CERC conference in Portugal and the Frontiers Conference in Finland, if those papers were accepted, they can apply for our scholarship. It's $1,000, and that we started that one last year. Our newest ones are research grants up to $5,000, and they are for research that's in progress. That one opened on February 4th weeks. We are going to give those grants every quarter, every 3 months. So there's more on our website on that. There's more on our website about our service research themes. We compressed the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals into 7 categories that we think are a more compressed way of thinking about things from a service research perspective. And I won't go into more detail about those because we have a webinar posted on our website about it. There's an article about each of these things that was written by various co-authors. A large number of people participated in this. If I remember correctly, 17 different co-authors participated in this process. But here's one more slide tied to that. For the last topic, the seventh topic on collaboration, we asked the artist who does all of our graphics, Natalie Sketcher designed our logo, she designed these. We asked her to create a graphic that showed the connection between collaboration and the other 6 research themes. And you can see that to emphasize the collaboration, we showed arrows going every which way and all coming back to a need for collaboration, or as Jay is emphasizing, the friendship issues of being able to work with each other. So what we would ask you is, who can you collaborate with in your school, in your country, in the world to pursue a collaborative wisdom research project that serves humanity? And I would urge you to add that wisdom layer to your thinking. In other words, the difference between knowledge is knowing something, and wisdom is knowing what to do. What should we do? We aren't asking enough what should we do questions in our research. We need to do more. And that gets me to 2 last quick slides before I take questions from you, how to get involved with us. Basically, you can go to our website and find out more about who we are, what we do, and how to get involved. And I always like to finish with a slide about how to get involved by emphasizing that CertCollab is a nonprofit, and it's possible to donate to things like the research grants, things like the scholarship, and to various other things we will be doing in the future. And now it's time for questions. So this is where I'm going to stop the recording and come back to the regular Zoom mode. So